audience, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. I'm your host Faraz Darvesh. Today we are going to discuss on what is really going on CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. There are so many myths about this, and today we are going to check out some facts. So what are the myths about China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that we seldom hear in our circles? First, Pakistan is going to go bankrupt because of CPEC. China is going to come and take over the Pakistani market. All the products will be Chinese made products and Pakistani manufacturers will go bankrupt. Hence, no jobs for Pakistanis. China will take over Pakistan's market. Well, these are the myths that we occasionally hear from our friends, and many are arguing against CPEC, that CPEC is a deal of bankruptcy for Pakistan. Well, let's check out some facts. So China is going to invest about $60 billion in CPEC. Out of those $60 billion, 80% are going to be invested via private firms in Pakistan. The Chinese investment will help create infrastructure in Pakistan, roads, bridges, on 1.6% of interest rate, which is much lower than what World Bank offers. Yes, World Bank interest rates are about 3.5%. Pakistan economy is already showing some positive indications due to CPEC. Yes. Pakistan's growth rate and all the projections that World Bank and IMF projected, they are already taking their projections up, meaning there has been some increases in the projections. According to US-based consulting firm Deloitte and Touche, the CPEC is going to add about 700,000 jobs between now and 2030. Yes, so let's check out what is really going on in CPEC, why we have so many myths, why are people speaking against CPEC. I have with me Riaz Haq and Misbah Azam. Riaz, let me begin with you. Why are there so many myths? Is Pakistan really going to go bankrupt? Is this a deal of bankruptcy between China and Pakistan? So, I mean, tell me what is really going on in CPEC.
There's a term called FUD, which stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Back in the 80s, when IBM started to see competition from other mainframe computer manufacturers, they used this tactic called FUD against their competition. They used to go and tell their customers, the people who make purchasing decisions, such as the IT managers, the MIS managers in these big corporations, that who knows if it's gonna work or not. If you buy, instead of us, if you buy Amdahl or if you buy from some other company, is it gonna work? Your job depends on it. You could lose your job. You could go bankrupt if your company cannot actually use these and they don't perform. So they created a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of doubt in the minds of these purchasing managers. And that tactic actually often worked in a lot of cases. So what I see now is people who are detractors of CPEC, people who don't want Pakistan to succeed, people who don't want the China and Pakistan relationship to grow. They are creating the same kind of FUD against CPEC.
Okay.
And these are basically countries that don't want CPEC.
So what is their benefit?
I think their benefit is they don't want this to succeed. They don't want China to succeed. They don't want Pakistan to succeed. A lot of it is coming from the West and from India, because they're openly opposed to CPEC.
So many of these objections on CPEC are coming from Pakistan, people living in Pakistan.
So what they do is they also use people in Pakistan to create these fears, these uncertainties, and these doubts.
So you're saying
they're doing it, not only doing it themselves, but they're also planting the seeds of the same fear, uncertainty, and doubt among the minds of the people in Pakistan.
So
that's the whole purpose of this.
So you're saying there are basically foreign agents.
I wouldn't say they're foreign agents. They could be, but I think they could simply be just people who are being misguided as a result of this campaign.
Misbah.
Yeah, see, I visited Pakistan last year, and I did hear what basically you are talking about, that there are people who have a concern about, but those people are not the people who are some analysts and all that. The top analysts who are talking about the CPEC is more of Dr. Khurram Hussain, He writes in Dawn News.
And he's speaking
And
against.
he is that's what I was about to say.
What is his rationale? I mean, he must have some rationale.
His rationale is very practical. He say that whatever we are doing, that we have to make sure that Pakistan would be control the eventual product. That is
Pakistan will have the full control on Gwadar.
On everything.
Okay.
Everything that Pakistan will benefit, which Pakistan is getting. Of course, he agrees that Pakistan is getting benefit, but that is his main rhetoric. And I'm not quite pointing out one of his article or anything. He's trying to say, and he's mostly blaming the government of Pakistan, who are kind of not taking seriously. Suppose once he wrote down that there was a special meeting, and it seems that Pakistanis were not even prepared for that meeting to talk to them, to the Chinese. And in his words, Chinese are hard bargainers, So you have to know very well when you go and negotiate.
So you have to be prepared.
You have to be prepared.
So
one more point I want to raise here. Another thing which is culturally in Pakistan, we look for a lot of loyalty, and like last week when I talked to Ambassador Hogland, he said one thing very interesting. He said you have to understand that any relation in the countries are transactional. I mean, if I have interest, you will give me. If you have interest, I will give you, and that's how it works. So Pakistan should understand those voices Riaz is talking about. Those people have to understand that China is not there to give us.
Just because China loves Pakistan. No, that's not the deal.
They have a very strategic interest
they
there,
have their own
and they are
interest,
going to
which
achieve
they want to achieve.
Exactly,
Yes.
and they will achieve.
Right. So this is for Pakistan to look for it. So Riaz, let's back up. Take a step back, and so those who are criticizing CPEC, and I think I heard a few of the analysts on YouTube. They say that the deal Pakistan is signing, CPEC could be good, but the deal they are signing is a deal of loss, where China will be gaining and Pakistan will be losing. So it has to be a deal where Pakistan and China both have a win-win situation. But instead, it is not a win-win situation. It is a win situation for China, but not a win situation for Pakistan. And then they blame Nawaz Sharif and the state of Pakistan for not negotiating well on the CPEC. What do you have to say to this?
Yeah, so let me explain a little bit about what CPEC is and what China is doing. CPEC is a part of what the Chinese call Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. It is over $1 trillion worth of projects spread all over the world. They're not just in Pakistan. Pakistan happens to be probably the second largest recipient of infrastructure investments so far, but the Chinese are talking to a lot of countries. They're talking to Russia, they're talking to Central Asian countries. They're also even talking with Latin Americans. They're talking to Africans. Last week there was World Economic Forum, and there was a report in New York Times that said that the real stars of World Economic Forum were the Chinese. It was not Trump, it was not the United States. All of the sessions that were related to BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, were packed. They had the highest attendance. And they also mentioned, the New York Times article also mentioned that at one of the sessions where Pakistani Prime Minister Shahid Haqqan Abbasi was presenting about CPEC, it was full, it was packed. And there, a Chinese diplomat, actually, a very senior diplomat, introduced the Pakistani Prime Minister there. So one of the things, the advantages that Pakistan is getting a lot of positive vibes in the world, particularly in front of the international business and investment community, people with
It's
money.
Good marketing.
It's great marketing for Pakistan.
Right.
As far as the actual specific deals are concerned, the infrastructure is a huge problem in developing countries right now. There was a report done by Asian Development Bank that said there is currently a $1.7 trillion deficit in infrastructure spending right now. And it's going to grow to $45 billion over the next 10 years. And there is no way that Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, the kind of banks that actually, most of this is actually funded in developing countries, is funded through these loans from either the World Bank or the regional development banks like the Asian Development Banks. They don't have that kind of money. So what the Chinese have done is they've stepped in this gap. They've actually created their own infrastructure bank. It's called AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Pakistan is one of the founding members of that. The deals they're making are very similar in terms of financing the infrastructure that the World Bank makes, that the Asian Development Bank makes. Now, these were created by the United States to try and exert its influence in the world. The Chinese are basically doing the same thing. They want their influence to grow. They're competing for influence in the world with the United States. But, like the United States, they also have to worry about the other party getting something out of it. It has to be a win-win. Right. If it's a zero-sum game, that the Chinese gain and the others lose, these are not going to work. The Chinese know that. They're smart enough to understand that. They're not going to be able to grow their influence. They're not going to be able to become a great superpower that they want
game for the other party.
Yeah. So they have to work on it. Now, so Pakistani interest rates that you just mentioned for the infrastructure loans is about 1.7%, which is very cheap. I mean, commercial loans that Pakistan takes is about
1.6%.
Yeah, 1.6 or 1.7 in that range.
Right.
The commercial loans that we take are about like 6 to 7 to 8% sometimes.
Oh, well, now, World Bank offers at about 3.8%.
Yeah. So, but those are concessional rates.
Concessional.
Now, the other thing to look at is as far as the power plants are concerned. Now, no nation, no economy can develop if you don't have basic things like energy, and if you don't have roads and ports, those kinds of infrastructure.
And security.
Yeah. But I'm talking about after you've got security, you got to have these things.
Right.
Now, the Chinese are not only funding the infrastructure, giving by concessional loans to build roads and ports and these kinds of things, they're also building a lot of power plants. Now, there a lot of people say that, hey, why are we giving them such high returns? Now, the Chinese companies that are investing in Pakistan power projects are doing it under a policy that the Pakistani government developed back in the 1990s with the World Bank to encourage investment, foreign investment in private power plants. Now, this is called PPI policy, the IPP policy, Independent Power Producers Policy. That policy, the return on equity that Pakistan guarantees to people who invest in power sector in Pakistan, return on equity they guarantee 17%. Now they think it's too high. Well, too high relative to what? I looked at 8,000 different companies in the United States. The average return on equity for the United States companies is about 14 to 15%.
Similar range.
Yeah. So 17% is not that high. The second thing is that for the power sector, usually the return on equity is lower. It's about 10 to 12 or 13%. It varies from state to state. Some states are very good credit, so they get very low. They can get investment at very, very low returns by guaranteeing low. Alabama is the highest. Alabama guarantees 13% return on equity. Now, this is return on equity, not on the entire, project. It is the part of the project that is their equity, the investor's equity. If, for example, it's a $500 million power plant, and the company takes invests $100 million of its own money and finances the rest of it, the $400 million, then they only guarantee the 17% on the $100 million, not the $500 million. Okay. So again, that's just misleading to say that we're giving 17% on everything. The rest of it, whatever loans they take, and they usually, borrow money, just like most big, project investors do. They borrow money, the rest of the money. They put $100 million of their own money. They borrow $400 million from financial institutions, and then they build a plant. Now they have to repay the loan. They also have to repay their investors.
They won't invest, right? Yep. Who paid $100 million?
So then the financing cost goes into the over cost of operation, whatever they have to pay back. So I think these are reasonable deals. I don't see anything unusual. Now, obviously, when you have a serious problem, such as Pakistan had, crippling shortages of power, your industry cannot work, your economy cannot grow. So you have to attract, and to attract investors, you have to offer them something higher than what is being offered by others in order to attract them to invest in your country rather than go somewhere.
And you have to build the infrastructure on a very quick basis.
Absolutely.
If you don't have infrastructure, then you have a problem.
A lot of these FUD is because they basically cite these figures. Hey, they're going to rip us off. They're taking 17%, return everything. That's too high. Now, in fact, if you look at the power rates in Pakistan today, just this month I saw the latest NEPRA has decided on power rates that are actually lower per unit cost than in India. In Pakistan, the rate that the NEPRA has said is 4.6 cents per unit. In India, it's about 5.4 cents. So what people do is they take some examples of some deal that was signed at 3 cents and then say this is the rate in India. No, that's not the rate in India. You have to look at all the different sources of power and get the average of that. That's what you compare.
So they pick and choose and then criticize.
Exactly.
What is in their interest? Misbah, over to you.
Yeah, actually, the thing is that whenever somebody is bringing that much investment, don't expect that it is only you are the big beneficiary or you're equally big beneficiary. Big beneficiary is the one who is bringing the investment. But you have to see it that where we can pull the maximum out of it. And that has something to do with the government inside Pakistan, the people who are helm of affair in Pakistan, to pull the maximum out of it. Of course, China is going to do it. They have their strategic reasonings for that. And you and I can talk about it. But the thing is that that is very important that in Pakistan, the people, anybody does that. I mean, if you say, okay, fine, you don't agree with the way CPEC is going, then what? I mean, what you want to do is you want to just tell them that no, I will see only I should be gaining and you should gain the minimum. China is not going to accept that. They are spending close to $60 billion, which is the investment and partners loan, as you.
So let me ask you this: so who are the in that neighborhood, who is feeling threatened by CPEC?
Well, CPEC, India is feeling threatened, first of all. Afghanistan is not. Afghanistan wants to get involved, but of course it is under pressure from US and from India. So that's why they are keeping quiet.
What about Iran?
Iran is not. Iran will eventually join it because even Britain is now joining it. It's One Belt, One Road, initiative. Okay. So of course Iran will be on board.
But there has been a lot of talk in the media that Iran is feeling threatened because Chabahar is going to get undermined due to
no, Chabahar
CPEC.
is okay.
The Chabahar port of Iran is going to get undermined.
No, but the thing is that Chabahar and Gwadar, they can work together. They're sister ports. They can work together. They can share the load of each other. I mean, of course. I mean, see, the thing is that this type of huge economic activity, nobody should be threatened. Okay, in Chinese, even if China is putting their military base there, I'm being hypothetical here. Even if happening, it is not going to hurt Iranian interest by any means. So of course, Iran's threatening, I never heard this thing that Iran is really threatened about it. Of course, they want to have their Chabahar to be hot, but after Gwadar, Chabahar is not as huge as Gwadar. Of course, they can work together. They are just 40 miles away from each other.
Riyaz, let me throw the same question over to you. So who are the players who are feeling threatened? And what is the role of Iran in this?
It's pretty obvious that India obviously doesn't want to see Pakistan succeed. They think that if Pakistan becomes economically strong, it could be a threat to them. That's what they perceive.
And this is why this whole Balochistan...
and they want to disrupt it. They want to do everything they can to sabotage it. Okay. And we know that Kulbhushan Yadav actually was sent to do this, and he admitted all these things. Then, and Modi is on record as opposing it. He doesn't want it. United States has opposed it. They've been talking about, what Mattis said, that it passes through disputed territory, therefore we don't support it. And the real reason is that they see China as a rising power and they don't like Chinese influence growing. The entire BRI initiative. But the other nations actually are more open to working with the Chinese. For example, when the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank was launched by China, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the United States strongly opposed it. But some of the US allies like Britain joined, Australia joined the Asian Infrastructure Bank. So they know where the money is, because if they can get money out of it, if they can get some business out of it, they want to be in it. If the way the things work is, for example, when the World Bank gives you a loan, they usually specify, and they are involved in the selection of the contractors, who's going to be building this thing, and they sometimes have their own consultants involved. If Asian Infrastructure Bank is investing somewhere or financing, they will be involved in selecting who the contractors are and how the money is going to be spent. So if you're a part of that bank, and Pakistan is one of the founding members of the Asian Infrastructure Bank, then that's going to be beneficial to them.
Right. Now, take it to
this
Iran.
is basically a fight for the influence. America created all these institutions like the World Bank, like the WTO, like all these regional development banks, IMF, in order to exert its influence on the world,
Right.
to be the big honcho. The Chinese are basically emulating. Essentially, some people are now comparing BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, to WTO, because with all these routes being constructed, there's going to be a lot more global trade. And who will have a bigger say in that global trade? It's going to be the Chinese.
Okay. And what is the role of Iran?
I think Iran has some serious problems right now. Part of it is the United States signed this deal with Iran for the nuclear deal. And there was an expectation that some of these sanctions are going to ease, life is going to get easier for the Iranians, but that hasn't happened. Ever since Trump came in, he's been trying to make life difficult for the Iranians. So for the Iranians, it's very difficult to get into any kind of a deal that is international, because U.S. opposes it. One of the ways the U.S. opposes it, for example, in order to do business with any country, you have to have banks that work with each other. The U.S. does not let any bank work with the Iranian banks. And when they do, they try and apply sanctions against those banks. So I think the real problem that Iran has is not with CPEC, it's not with China, it's really with the United States.
Okay. So Misbah, thank you so much. Riaz, thank you so much for giving your input. So audience, you heard the data, you heard what Riaz and Misbah had to say. CPEC is definitely going in Pakistan's favor, but if you hear all these myths and all these counter arguments against CPEC, it's good to do some research. It's good to go on the internet, do some research and check out what is really going on. Until next week, take care. Goodbye.